15 sinister and haunted Reddit stories revealed unexplained terrors that cursed the innocent. The rain fell like shards of glass against the windows of Sarah's home in Maplewood. She huddled on the couch, her two small children playing quietly in the corner. The familiar hum of the suburb had turned into a whisper of unease. It started innocently enough, a Reddit thread titled 15 Sinister and Haunted Reddit Stories, a casual scroll that spiraled into a nightmare. Each chilling post detailed grotesque encounters, pets vanishing without a trace, eerie figures lurking just beyond the tree line, neighbors whose friendly smiles morphed into cold stares. Panic washed over Sarah, her heart racing with each horrifying tale. Then came the stories that hit home. The descriptions too close, too familiar. Maplewood was more haunted than she'd ever imagined. She heard the children's whispers about shadows in the woods, tales of figures gliding silently, beckoning them deeper into the trees. Told to stay away, they said, their innocent voices quavering with fear. Sarah's breath hitched in her throat, her instincts screaming for caution. Just some kids playing, her husband Daniel reassured her, but his voice felt distant. Late-night arguments spilled into fateful days where anxiety gripped her every moment. Each friendly neighbor was a potential threat, every glance filled with suspicion. The haunts weren't just tales anymore, they seeped into the air thick with dread. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling, a creeping intuition that something was very wrong in their perfect little suburb. A deep insecurity took root within her, feeding off her recent layoff and the pressure to keep her family safe. Soon, she noticed the gatherings in the woods, a flickering light through the branches at twilight, silhouettes moving in rhythm, mere shadows of life returning from a world once thought safe. Her heart pounded like a drum at the thought of something lurking just out of sight. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As night descended, the shadows grew bolder. Tension crackled in the air, thick as fog. Daniel rolled his eyes at her fears, thinking of their once safe haven. But then his phone lit up with troubling messages urging him to dismiss his wife's fears, calling her unhinged. Chilling words carved out a rift between them, leaving Sarah shivering with uncertainty. The community she trusted was rapidly becoming unrecognizable, shifting under the weight of something sinister that nobody dared confront. With each passing day, pets went missing, faces grew gaunt, and whispers became the norm. Sarah uncovered local legends filled with haunting echoes of a spirit seeking vengeance, a protector drawn to the chaos she and her family had unwittingly unearthed. She couldn't stay idle. No more would she watch from the sidelines. She'd venture into those woods. It was time to confront the evil lurking outside, threatening to swallow her whole. The night she finally steeled her resolve, the moon cast an ethereal glow through the branches, illuminating a thin circling path. As she stepped deeper into the heart of darkness, the flicker of flames caught her eye, and what she saw froze her blood. Figures cloaked in shadows, dancing around a fire. Her heart raced, and she realized with horror that her once beloved Maplewood hid a cult-like gathering, where the web of trust spun dangerously close to her own family. Just as realization crashed in, a rustle, a whisper, and glowing eyes stared from the depths. Betrayal echoed through the woods, and as her breath quickened, the shadows closed in, leaving Sarah caught in a nightmarish dance of fear, loyalty, and unfathomable darkness. The shadows pulsated as the figures around the fire chanted in low, guttural voices. The flames flickered wildly, casting twisted silhouettes that danced erratically on the trees. Sarah stumbled backward, her heart pounding like a war drum, the sound deafening in her ears. She dared a glance behind her, but the path back remained shrouded in darkness. Panic surged through her. She was trapped. "Who are you?" she called, her voice barely rising above the sinister hum. The figures turned as one, their faces obscured by heavy hoods, but their eyes glowed like embers in the night. A figure stepped forward, the heat of the fire illuminating a gnarled hand that gestured towards her. It was a woman, her mouth moving in rapid incantations. The sound sent a shiver down Sarah's spine, scraping against her sanity. She felt an urge to run, to scream for Daniel, but the words fell right back into her throat, suffocated by fear. "Join us," the woman intoned, her voice seductively low. "You feel the pull, don't you?" Sarah clutched her chest, adrenaline coursing through her body. It was true, something about this gathering drew her in, even as it terrified her. Images flooded her mind, visions of all the whispered stories and missing pets that had haunted Maplewood. Somehow, they were woven into this very moment. "Stay away." A spark of desperation ignited within her. This wasn't an invitation, it was a trap. But why? What were they after? With a surge of courage, she turned and ran, branches whipping at her face, feet stumbling over unseen roots. The chanting rose behind her, a spine-chilling chorus calling her back. "We need you." It echoed, entwining with the trees, resonating in her bones. Doubt clawed at her resolve as shadows blurred her vision. Just when she thought she was free, she collided with something solid, a hand gripping her shoulder. She spun around to find Daniel, eyes wide with horror, breathless and panicked. "Sarah! What are you doing here?" "Daniel, we have to leave." Frantic, she glanced back toward the fire, but the figures had vanished, swallowed by the blackness. The flicker of their fire was the last remnant of their presence. He pulled her close, his grip firm, but confusion shone on his face. "I got your texts. I thought you were losing it, but when I saw the lights, I came searching." The moment of relief was fleeting. An unnatural chill swept through the woods, the wind suddenly still. Sarah realized too late something had shifted, unseen eyes were watching them, shadows circling with intent. "Daniel," she whispered, dread pooling in her stomach. "They're close." And then, out of the corner of her eye, she caught movement, figures emerging from the trees, their faces shrouded in darkness, their bodies moving with predatory grace. Her instinct screamed for survival. "Run!" she shouted, lunging ahead without waiting for his response. Daniel followed, but their path twisted unnaturally, every step leading them deeper into a maze of trees. The chants returned, resonating louder, drowning out the sounds of their footsteps. Panic darkened her vision. With every frantic look over her shoulder, she saw them closer, honed in on their prey. The heart of Maplewood was whispering its secrets, and each echo reverberated with a chilling truth: there would be no escape. With one more desperate surge, they broke into a clearing, and what they saw sent their hearts plummeting. The ground was littered with remnants, broken toys, collars from lost pets, and pictures of families tacked to trees, each photo depicting those who had vanished. "What is this?" Daniel breathed, horror etched on his face as they stood frozen, and as the figures emerged from the shadows, their eyes gleaming with hunger, Sarah realized the nightmarish truth: they were the sacrificed ones, destined to be part of the very stories that had cursed Maplewood. In that harrowing moment, amid the gathering darkness, they faced a choice: fight or succumb to the very evil they had unwittingly woken. A scream broke the silence as the figures lunged forward. But who would scream first? The ground itself was shifting, the air pulsing with a sense of urgency. The real question dawned on Sarah: if they survived this confrontation, could Maplewood even be saved? The figures closed in, their silhouettes merging with the shadows cast by the towering trees. Sarah clenched Daniel's hand, the icy grip of fear squeezing tighter around her heart. The otherworldly chants intertwined with the rustle of leaves, creating an ominous symphony that seemed to echo from the depths of the earth itself. Each pulse of the sound felt like a warning, a reminder of the fate that awaited them if they froze in this moment. "Sarah!" Daniel's voice shattered her paralysis. "We have to fight." His tone turned desperate, and she could see the determination swimming in his wide eyes, even as the fear radiated off him. But what could they possibly do against a force like this? They were just two mortals against a horde of nightmarish shadows. She glanced back at the growing tide of darkness, the figures moving with a fluid grace that was both mesmerizing and terrifying. They were no longer just chanting. Now they whispered her name. Sarah, Sarah. It was a melody laced with malice, each syllable seeping into her mind. Hold on, she yelled, breaking away from Daniel for just a moment. A wild idea struck her like a lightning bolt. She rummaged through her pocket for the small flashlight she always kept nearby, her lifeline in the dark. She flicked it on and pointed it toward the approaching figures. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating ghastly, distorted faces. The light seemed to repel them, their forms flickering like dying embers, hesitating at its edge. Come on, Daniel. Hurry. She shouted, urging him to come closer. The beam cast shadows that danced frantically but provided a brief reprieve from their relentless approach. They moved together, a new surge of hope igniting between panic-stricken breaths. We've got to find a way out of here. Daniel gasped, darting toward the narrowing gap between trees ahead. Inside her, the weight of despair tugged at her, whispering that there might be no escape. But they couldn't stop. They wouldn't that as they ran. The chant transformed into overwhelming roars, shaking the very ground beneath them. Join us! Join us! They cried, a chorus of longing woven with anger. It seeped beneath her skin, gnawing at her resolve. We need to make it to the road. Sarah shouted, trying to drown out their voices. Branches lashed against her arms, thorny fingers that pricked her skin. Pain was fleeting, a distraction she could manage so long as they were alive. The light from her flashlight flickered as the shadows closed in, flickers growing weaker with each step she took. But, suddenly, they burst through the trees into another clearing. This one was different. A twisted altar made of stone lay at its center, covered in strange symbols that glowed faintly. Red streaks marred the white surface, and Sarah felt bile rise in her throat, a sickening connection to the lost souls that had once walked here. Daniel, don't look. We have to go. But it was too late. As if summoned by her voice, the figures froze, surrounding the altar like sentinels. Their glowing eyes narrowed, ready for something more than mere fear. Then, they recited something ancient, a language long forgotten but painfully familiar to her heart. In that horrifying moment, Sarah understood. This altar was where the darkness converged, the very source of the evil that had plagued Maplewood. It was a sacrificial ground. And deep within her gut, a chilling realization sank in. This sacrifice wasn't just for the vanished animals or people, it was for her and for Daniel. Sarah, Daniel whispered, his voice barely there. The fear in his eyes mirrored her own. Tell me we're getting out of this. As the figures stepped forward, as if drifting on an unseen current, the last of her light dimmed, leaving them in a suffocating darkness. The chanting rose to a deafening crescendo, drowning out their thoughts. Daniel, whatever happens, don't let them take you. Sarah screamed, bracing herself as the shadows lunged. Time seemed to stretch in that heartbeat, and just as she steeled herself for an inevitable end, a blinding light surged from the altar, illuminating the entire clearing. But where it came from, and what would be its price? The darkness twitched, and for one fleeting moment, they all hesitated. What awaited them, the light, or the void? The struggle had just begun. The light erupted like a firestorm, causing the shadows to recoil as if burned by an invisible force. Sarah shielded her eyes, feeling its warmth wash over her while shrouded figures writhed in agony. The altar pulsated, throbbing with energy that sent tremors through the ground. It was both a sanctuary and a prison, catching the echoes of desperation and despair. Sarah! Daniel shouted, pulling her away from the blazing brightness. They stumbled backward, the shadows shrinking but not fading. The light flickered, teetering on a fragile edge, and for a moment, it felt like hope. But in the next breath, that hope turned into a gnawing dread. Is it pushing them back? Or just playing with us? She whispered, staring into the grotesque faces of those who had once been lost. She fought against the rising tide of fear that clawed at her throat, reminding herself of the flickers of light. It meant life. It meant chance. Suddenly, a piercing shriek shattered the air. It wasn't the sound of the figures, but something darker, deeper, an echo from the very heart of the altar. "Join us," the shadows howled in unison, their voices merging into one haunting melody, saturated with an insatiable hunger. The ground shuddered, and Sarah could feel the darkness probing, seeking a way to reclaim control. "Keep that light steady," Daniel yelled, positioning himself to shield her. As he stepped in front, the light momentarily spilled over him, enhancing his outline, making him look like a warrior made of illumination against the dark. But as quickly as the light strengthened him, it waned. "We need to act now." Sarah caught a glimpse of what lay at the center of the altar, an inscription, shimmering eerily among the symbols, unreadable but commanding. Something within it authorized the cycle of terror, feeding the shadow's endless hunger. An impulse seized her. What if we have to destroy it? Daniel's face twisted in confusion. What? How? But she was already moving. Heart racing, she sprinted toward the altar, ignoring the wild cries encircling her, the clawing hands that reached out from the darkness. The light from her flashlight flickered furiously, as if sensing the encroaching danger. "Sarah, no!" Daniel shouted, fear threading through every syllable. Ignoring the danger, she hoisted the flashlight high above her head with both hands, aiming it squarely at the glowing inscription. "I'm going to break whatever this is. It's the source." The chanting grew louder, a chaotic symphony that matched the panic swelling within her. The shadows twitched, seeming to grasp the intent behind her action. For a brief moment, they paused, a hushed silence following her declaration. Then, they surged forward, a torrent of darkness, all ethereal eyes locked onto her. "Now!" she called, pressing the flashlight against the altar's surface as if it were a detonator. The aura of light connected with the symbols, sending sparks plummeting into the void. The ground shook, the figures shrieked, and Sarah felt the darkness clawing at her, grasping, trying to drag her into their abyss, but then something unexpected happened. The light pulsed, expanding outward like the explosion of a star, enveloping her and Daniel. Light erupted, swallowing the blackness, and the shadows screeched in agony, retreating back into dark glimpses that gave way to the chilling night. It was going to work, but then her heart dropped. The inscription began to smolder and crack, revealing something beneath a void, darker than any abyss she'd ever seen. It beckoned with an insidious whisper, a promise mixed with despair. And in that terrifying moment, they realized, even if they broke something, another darkness was waiting to seep through. As panic surged within her, Sarah turned to Daniel, his expression frozen in horror. "What have we done?" she whispered, gripping his arm tightly. With dread pooling in her gut, they both took a step back. But the shadows were already ripping through the cracks, the very ground beneath them revealing secrets best left buried. What had they unleashed? Would they survive? Their own desperation. The air thickened with a stench of burnt ozone, acrid and suffocating. Sarah's mind raced, adrenaline surging as she felt the ground tremble beneath her feet, vulnerable to whatever monstrosity lurked just beneath the surface. The shadows writhed like an angry serpent, hungry and relentless. "Daniel! We need to get out of here!" she shouted, her voice cracking under the weight of terror. The void pulsated, a black hole inviting chaos, and she could almost hear it laughing, a sinister, mocking sound that resonated deep in her bones. "Wait!" Daniel exclaimed, looking back at the altar. "Maybe there is still a chance. We have to contain it." "Contain it?" she echoed, incredulous. "Daniel, this is not containment. It's a gateway." Panic edged her tone, stating the obvious where once it had been a whisper. He hesitated, glancing between his love and the impending devastation. The inscription flickered ominously, and shadows seemed to emanate from its depths, curling and twisting like a memory long forgotten. "Do you think it's powerful enough to protect us?" he murmured, the thought leaving his lips with an uncertain hope. "Protect us?" Or consume us? Sarah countered. The moment stretched painfully, filled with uncertainty and fear. Without warning, a powerful eruption of energy shot from the void, knocking them off their feet. They landed hard, the cold earth biting through the fabric of their clothes. Gasping, Sarah scrambled to her knees, her flashlight flickering erratically. "They're coming!" Daniel yelled, scrambling upright as black tendrils burst forth from the altar. They slithered like snakes, weaving through the air towards them with an insatiable thirst. Climbing to her feet, Sarah felt the weight of their desperation. "We can't fight them. We have to seal it." "How?" Daniel's voice shook as he raised his hands protectively, light trembling weakly against the advancing dark. "Look!" Sarah pointed at the altar, the inscription barely visible now, overshadowed by the chaos. "It's not just a trap, it's a code. If we can just reverse it." Daniel nodded, conviction sparking in his eyes. "Let us find something to break it." As they searched the ground, Sarah felt that insidious darkness creeping ever closer, tendrils brushing against her skin like icy fingers. Panic surged as she caught a glimpse of one of the figures twisted and anguished, its gaunt face staring at her with empty sockets. Sarah Daniel's voice broke through her thoughts. She turned to see him clutching an old, rusted pickaxe half buried in the soil. "Daniel!" "Yes." She grabbed it from his hands, feeling the weight of it, the promise of breaking free from their nightmare. "Do it!" he shouted as shadows swirled closer, their whispers curling around their bodies. With a furious swing, Sarah struck the altar. The impact sent a shockwave, and the dark clawing at them seemed to recoil, howling in protest. The inscription cracked and splintered. But as light sliced through the darkness, a bone-chilling laughter echoed around them. The figures that had once stood still began to merge, creating a monstrous silhouette, eyes burning with fury. "What have you done?" it screeched, the ground shaking beneath their feet. "We just wanted to be free." Sarah cried out, heart thumping wildly. Freedom comes with a price, it rasped, and in that moment, she knew they hadn't just disturbed something ancient. They had awakened an entity that had been waiting, and it wasn't going to let them go that easily. The air thickened, choking her throat. Daniel's hand squeezed hers, their pulse racing against the onslaught of darkness. They couldn't run. They couldn't hide. Together. He urged, readying himself beside her, but could even their combined light hold back the chaos that threatened to consume their very souls? A chill from deep within the void whispered silent promises of ruin. What they had unleashed would not be contained. As the figure loomed large, casting shadows that devoured the light, Sarah realized they were not just fighting for their lives anymore, they were fighting for their very existence. What would they do when the light vanished forever? The darkness buckled under their resolve but surged back with a roar, a tempest that rattled the earth beneath them. Sarah felt her heart hammer against her ribcage, each pulse a reminder of the urgency that blanketed them. Clenching the pickaxe, she braced herself as shadowy hands clawed closer, slick and serpentine, desperate for a taste of their light. Daniel's breath quickened, and he tightened his grip on her hand. "We need to focus. Break the inscription before it's too late." His voice trembled, fighting through the chaos. "Right. Just aim for the cracked sections." Sarah shouted, raising the pickaxe high as she prepared to strike again. The altar loomed before them, dark and threatening, almost pulsating with a life of its own. With a swift swing, she aimed for another fracture, but the moment the metal connected with the stone, a shockwave of dark energy erupted. It knocked her backward, and she felt the breath forced from her lungs, a weight pressing down on her chest as she flailed to regain her footing. "Sarah!" Daniel cried, fear radiating from him as he fought back the swirling shadows emanating from the altar. Gasping, she struggled to rise against the unseen force pressing down upon her. The darkness around her coiled erratically, as if alive. All at once, the figure they had inadvertently summoned seemed to grow, its face melding grotesquely from the horror of their past nightmares. "Fools! You think you can bargain with forces beyond your comprehension? It thundered, slithering closer. Sarah's veins chilled as she struggled to push away the encroaching darkness. "We didn't mean to awaken you," she screamed, panic clawing at her throat. "We only wanted to stop this." The entity screeched, a sound that raised goosebumps all over her skin. "Every choice has a cost. You will pay dearly." Daniel's voice trembled as he shouted over the creature's wailing, "We can't back down, Sarah. We have to break the inscription." She nodded, the fire of determination sparking within her once more. With renewed resolve, she lifted the pickaxe, but this time she aimed not just for the cracks, she targeted the ravenous shadows, focusing her energy on shattering their grasp. Each swing drew more chaos, dark shapes howling as they dissolved under its metal edge. Then, a blinding flash lit up the space. An unbearable light surged forth from the altar, blinding Sarah momentarily. She blinked, squinting into the brightness and hearing the anguished wails of the monstrous figure around them. The void trembled, cascading ripples of shadow that twisted and distorted like a snake shedding its skin. "Keep going," Daniel urged, desperation thick in his tone. "You're doing it." With one final, full-force swing, Sarah felt the pickaxe connect with the heart of the inscription. The light exploded like a supernova, filling the air with a searing brightness. It shoved back the darkness momentarily, silence flooding in like a breath of fresh air. But before they could rejoice, the light fractured as the entity howled in rage, uttering a word that chilled Sarah's bones. "Imbeciles! You have only awakened me further." The ground broke apart with violent force as the shattered altar sent shockwaves resonating through the air. Shadows writhed and gathered, twisting into a cyclone that roared like a hurricane. Sarah and Daniel staggered backward, desperately trying to shield themselves from the storm. "Sarah! We need to get out now," Daniel yelled as the once stable ground beneath them began to buckle. Their escape was blocked, dark tendrils unfurled, slapping against their legs and pulling them backward. Panic set in. Sarah glanced at the swirling chaos, where faces contorted in horror merged into one nightmarish visage of despair. "Run!" she screamed, instinctively pulling Daniel with her as they raced toward the only visible exit, a crack in the chaos leading into the woods beyond, but the ground trembled beneath their hurried steps, snapping and cracking like thunder. The entity's terrible voice echoed in their ears as they fled. "You think you can escape? This is only the beginning. I will hunt you down." They stumbled into the darkness of the forest as branches clawed at their skin. Behind them, the shriek of an ancient evil lit the night. The hollow laughter haunted them, a relentless reminder that they had escaped one nightmare only to flounder into another. "What do we do now?" Daniel gasped, breath heavy with dread. "Find shelter," Sarah panted, fear crashing over her anew, but in the silence of the forest, the shadows lingered, licking their lips, waiting patiently for its next meal. As they plunged deeper into the oppressive blackness, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't just running from an evil, it was chasing them, eager to claim its prey. How far could they run before it caught them? And what had they truly unleashed into the world? The trees loomed high, twisting up into the sky like fingers clawing for salvation. Sarah and Daniel stumbled deeper into the woods, the weight of darkness nipping at their heels. The air thickened, tangy with the smell of damp earth and something rotten, as if the ground itself was decomposing. Every rustle of leaves made their hearts race, every snap of a twig sent prickles of fear crawling up their spines. "Did you hear that?" Daniel whispered, his voice barely a breath. His eyes darted around, searching the suffocating blackness that surrounded them. "Yes." Sarah spat back, keeping her voice low but laced with urgency. "We have to stay quiet. It's close." But she could feel an insatiable hunger in the air, crawling over her skin. It was tracking them, its laughter weaving through the branches like a vengeful wind. Shadows flitted just out of sight, lurking just beyond the glow of their trembling flashlights. "What are we going to do?" Daniel whimpered, panic bubbling beneath his words. It's coming for us. Keep moving," Sarah urged, forcing her legs to carry her forward as adrenaline coursed through her veins. We need to find a place to hide. They ducked under low branches and pushed through dense thickets. The woods felt like a maze, each turn revealing more darkness, more lurking shapes. Shadows writhed and twisted, responding to their fear like eager predators. Then they spotted a rundown cabin nestled between the trees. Its wood was gray with age, windows shattered, a ghostly figure that beckoned them closer. Sarah didn't think twice, dragging Daniel toward it. They stumbled onto the rickety porch, and she pushed the door open, wincing at the creaking protest. Inside, the air felt stale and cold, a stark contrast to the suffocating heat of their fear. The beams of their flashlights played across dust-covered furniture and bare walls, the remnants of lives long forgotten. "This place is a graveyard," Daniel muttered. He pressed his back against the wall, breathing heavily, eyes scanning the room for any signs of life. "Just for now, just until we catch our breath," Sarah insisted, her heart racing as they searched for any sign of safety. But the shadows seeped in even here, curling around the corners like a living thing hungry and restless. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from somewhere in the cabin, sending Sarah and Daniel jumping. "Did you hear that?" Daniel whispered, eyes wide with terror. "Yes. It's here. It's inside." Her words spilled out like frantic gasps. They moved deeper into the cabin, seeking refuge, every creak of the wood beneath their feet like a countdown. The darkness flickered, morphing, as a creeping feeling slithered up Sarah's spine. "We have to barricade the door," she shouted as she spotted an old wooden table, heavy but manageable. Together, they shoved it against the door, the wood scraping loudly in protest as they heaved it into place. They retreated to a corner, the adrenaline making their hearts pound and sink, listening intently for any signs of their pursuer, but silence cloaked the cabin like a heavy blanket, the air thickening with tension. "What if it's just waiting for us?" Daniel asked, his voice trembling. What if it knows we're here?" Sarah swallowed hard, her throat dry. "We have to find a way to fight back to stop it." She glanced around, searching the gloom for anything that could serve as a weapon. Sunlight filtered through the broken window, casting eerie patterns across a dusty table. In the corner, something glinted, a rusted knife, half buried in debris. "Over there." Sarah pointed, feeling a surge of hope. "I'll get it." As she dove for the knife, the tension in the air shifted, snapping like a tight wire. The door shuddered violently, the table rattling against it as something pounded from the other side. "Go! Go! Get it!" Daniel cried, fear scraping at his voice as he reached for the door, attempting to hold it steady. With frantic fingers, Sarah grabbed the knife and whirled around, only to see the shadows pulse and shift in the darkness. "It's coming in!" she screamed, her heart racing. They weren't safe yet. The entity was relentless. And they had just begun to awaken its true fury. "Daniel, we have to hold it back." Sarah's voice was sharp, cutting through the chaos that swirled around them. "But how do you fight something that feeds on fear?" And just as that thought crossed her mind, the door creaked open slowly, the table pushed aside with an otherworldly strength. There it stood, its form writhing, a mass of pure darkness, and the realization hit her like a cold wave: they had awakened a beast that wouldn't just hunt them in the woods. It would follow them into the very depths of their nightmares. Could they fight it, or would it consume them whole? As the figure loomed larger, they had only minutes to figure out how to survive, before it snuffed out the last flicker of their hopes. The darkness loomed over them, a swirling mass that seemed to inhale the very light around. Sarah's grip tightened on the knife as she glanced at Daniel, whose face had gone pale, eyes wide and frantic. "What do we do?" he stammered, his voice barely a whisper, almost lost in the shadows that dripped around the cabin. "Stay back. Just stay back," she shouted, desperation clawing at her throat. The figure at the door pulsed, shifting and slithering into a more defined shape, as if it was tasting the air. Its presence felt electric, a chill that numbed her bones and filled her heart with dread. Daniel edged closer to her, his breaths rapid and shallow. "We can't stay here. We need a way out. No, wait. We have to hold it off. Sarah's voice was firm, but the doubt weighed heavily on her. Maybe it can't come in if we. The mass surged forward, filling the doorway and pushing against the table. Splinters shot through the air as the table buckled, and panic exploded inside them. It's trying to get in. Daniel screamed, lunging toward the door in a futile attempt to reinforce the barricade. Don't! Sarah cried, but he was already too close. The darkness rippled, pulsing with life, and a ghastly sound filled the air, a low, mocking chuckle, like wind rustling through graveyard leaves. It was a sound that seemed to scrape against their fear. Get back! She shouted, leaping forward, knife raised, but before she could reach him, the cabin shifted. The walls twisted in the dim light, and the floor trembled beneath their feet as if the very foundation was alive with horror. She caught a glimpse of Daniel's terrified face before the shadows surged again, overwhelming their defenses. A rushing wind howled through the cabin's broken windows, extinguishing the beams of their flashlights. In the darkness, Sarah felt the pressure around her tighten, suffocating and real. She could hear the weight of despair settle over them like a shroud. Sarah, the name emerged from Daniel's lips, strained and fearful, sounding almost like a prayer. No. We can't give in. Hold on. She yelled back, her heart racing. We can fight it. She had to believe that. There had to be something, anything they could do. The laughter became a cacophony, echoing inside their minds. Sarah felt her resolve falter, the doubt seeped in like a poison. Shadows darted around her, whispering secrets of dread and forgotten fears, revealing the darkest corners of her soul. Look! Daniel pointed toward an old fireplace, its mantle crumbling and covered in dust. Beside it rested the remnants of an iron poker, blackened and rusted, but still sturdy. If we can get that, the shadows roared with a fury that reverberated within her bones, cutting off his words like a knife. They surged forward, slamming against the table as it splintered apart. The door was barely holding, and all at once, the remains of their barrier fell away. Dark tendrils slithered through the opening, reaching for them like grasping hands. Run! Sarah screamed, adrenaline surging through her. She seized Daniel's arm, and they dashed away from the door, scrambling toward the fireplace. They reached the poker just as a shadow lunged for them, fingers clawing at the air. Sarah gripped the poker tightly, her pulse thundering in her ears. We have to hit it. It's our only chance. Daniel nodded, his face set with determination. On 3, 1, 2. A scream tore from their lips as the shadow lunged once more, filling the space between them like a tidal wave of darkness. 3. They swung hard, striking the shadow that enveloped the room. Nothing. The poker passed through the darkness like vapor, and a wrathful howling filled the cabin. Sarah's heart sank. What do we do now? She searched the room for solace, but the shadows danced ever closer, eager to consume them, and then she noticed its movements were not just erratic but calculated, like it was anticipating their fears and desires. Daniel remembered the story. Sarah's voice quivered, realization dawning. It feeds on our fear. What if we turn it against itself? Wait, how? It's not human. It's not human. Maybe it can't survive our defiance. The entity shrieked, and Sarah summoned every ounce of bravery, forcing the words out despite the panic threatening to swallow her whole. You don't scare me. You're just shadows. I refuse to let you take us. For the first time, she felt her voice grow stronger, empowered by a surge of defiance that echoed in the stillness of the room. The shadow paused, writhing hesitantly. Daniel caught on, his voice rising above the chaos. Yeah. You're nothing but a figment of our imagination. We will not fear you. The darkness flickered, wavering as it absorbed their words, but then it lunged again, a furious wave of hate and fury crashing against their resolve. Keep fighting. Sarah shouted. Don't give in. The room trembled as their proclamation filled the air with an electrifying charge, and for just a moment, she believed they could win. Then, with a deafening roar, the shadow surged toward them once more, and Sarah realized the struggle was only beginning. What would they need to face next? And would their defiance be enough to shelter them from an enemy that fed on their darkest fears? The shadows stuttered as they drew back, hesitating for just a heartbeat, a flicker of uncertainty rippling through the edges of darkness. But the brief moment of hope quickly shattered. The entity roared again, a deafening sound that sliced the air, amplifying the terror that churned in Sarah's gut. "It knows we're not afraid," she yelled, trying to better her grip on the poker. "We need to give it more." Daniel's eyes darted around the cabin, searching for anything, any clue that could tip the balance in their favor. The whirlwind of shadows seemed to pulse with an almost sentient rage, and he sensed that desperation was leaking into every corner of their minds. It's waiting for us to falter," he stammered, his voice trembling. "What if we don't even think about it? We can't show weakness. Keep talking," Sarah shouted, channeling the rage coursing through her veins. "Tell it what we want. Tell it we're not scared." The darkness reformed, tendrils pooling at their feet, weaving around them with malicious intent. "You're trapped in here," it hissed, its voice dripping like melting wax. "You think you can defy me? I want to let you take us." Sarah shouted back, her voice steady despite the icy tendrils wrapping tighter around her ankles. "We're stronger together. You're just a monster, an illusion that feeds on fear." Another laugh followed, sharp like shattered glass. "Is that what you believe?" it taunted. "Yours are not the only fears I feed upon." Suddenly, Sarah felt 100 memories creep into her consciousness, every humiliating moment, every tiny fear she had tucked away, dark secrets that morphed into phantoms in the shadow. Daniel stood frozen beside her, horror creeping into his expression as he too felt the weight of their darkest moments clawing up from the depths of his mind. "No. Fight it," Sarah urged. "Don't let it in." With each passing second, the shadows loomed larger, their colors turning vibrant yet grotesque, melding with the fears they had summoned. They defined anxiety, insecurities, every failure that haunted them, merging into a figure that laughed and jeered, echoing their doubts. "You want to escape. You are nothing. Shut up," Daniel blurted, clenching his fists. "This isn't real. I want to give you power. Don't listen," Sarah yelled, heart racing. "Focus. Remember when we were happy? When we felt whole? Tell it. It's just nonsense, pretend fear," Daniel suddenly shouted. The darkness responded with another furious roar, shaking the very cabin, as if it was trying to cast them out into the suffocating night beyond. "Your happiness is unimportant. You're nothing without your failures." The monster writhed, patches of darkness swirling and writhing like oil on the surface of water. The shadows lunged, flickering dangerously close, but they held their ground. "We're not going to break," Sarah yelled, every sound echoing like a battle cry. "We're here. We exist. Defy this." The shadows stalled, flickering back momentarily, however, their haunting laughter seeped into her very bones once more. "You think you can fight me?" It sneered, and then it hit them. The realization swept through Daniel like a cold rush, like fingers wrapping around his heart. Maybe it does know us better than we want to accept. But it can't own us." In unison, they began to recall moments they cherished, memories of warmth, laughter, even the petty squabbles that had once seemed so significant. "We are who we choose to be," Sarah shouted defiantly, her voice rising above the tempest swirling around them. The shadows contorted, howling in rage, wailing like a banshee desperate to silence their defiance. Yet, Sarah felt the flicker of power spark in the room again, every word summoned back the glimmers of light they thought had been extinguished. Then, as if sensing the threat of their combined strength, the darkness surged one last time. But Sarah and Daniel stood firm. Together. She shouted, the walls pulsed as the room shifted and swayed dramatically, shadows undulating like waves crashing against the shore. But just as they began to believe hope had a crack, something unexpected happened. Frigid air swept through the cabin again, carrying the sound of whispers, dark and ancient. "You think this charade can hold?" The shadows began to swirl with renewed fury, and Sarah quickly realized they weren't prepared for what would come next. What is happening?" Daniel muttered, voice quaking. I don't know." Sarah felt a chill racing up her spine as the shadows closed in again. The darkness was pulsating with a fury that crushed hope and joy, thriving instead on confusion and despair. And then it hit her, the realization of what they hadn't prepared for, the thing that lay ravenous, waiting just beyond their reach. As their united front wavered beneath the volcanic force of fear, they heard it echo back with a sinister tone, "Let me show you your truth." Beneath that voice, a new darkness churned, more twisted and cruel than anything they had faced. What truth would it reveal? What horrors lay hidden in the corners of their souls waiting to be uncovered? And as the shadows surged forwards once more, the only thing Sarah and Daniel could do was brace themselves. The shadows surged forward, enveloping Sarah and Daniel in a swirling tempest of darkness. Their breaths were rapid, hearts pounding against the growing weight of despair. The air felt electric with fear as the entity they had awoken twisted around them, seeking to exploit every doubt and insecurity. "Sarah, hold on." Daniel's voice pierced through the chaos, forcing her to focus on his gaze, a beacon of light despite the shadows clawing at their sanity. "We've come this far. Don't let it win." The cacophony of shouting voices melded into a singular roar, relentless and unforgiving. But despite the terror, Sarah felt a flicker of defiance igniting within her. They had been running and hiding for too long, and it was time to take a stand. "You don't get to control us. You are just shadows," she screamed, her voice rising above the din. "Don't give in." Daniel echoed, clenched fists shaking with determination. "I believe in us." With every ounce of strength, they grasped the iron poker and thrust it forward, tucked under the utter darkness. When they struck the swirling mass again, the shadows hissed, retreating momentarily from the direct hit. In that crucial moment, a shred of light slipped through the cracks of dusk, illuminating the remnants of warmth that had been long forgotten in their hearts. "Remember when we laughed? The time we danced under the stars?" Sarah shouted, drawing on the bright memories that reminded her of who they truly were. "This isn't us. This is just a distortion." Daniel's eyes widened as he caught her energy. "We have happy moments. We've built a life. We want to let you take that away." The shadows pushed back again, but the weight of their united memories surged more forcefully, breaking through the ominous fog that sought to consume them. "You want to see the truth?" The entity howled, desperate and enraged. "I'll show you your deepest nightmares." Suddenly, the air shifted, pouring into visions that flashed before them. Dark moments twisted and churned frightening images of loss, betrayal, failure, and grief. Each vision dredged up the fears they had buried deep, all the hurt that they had ever carried. Sarah trembled, feeling that choking grasp return, a claw wrapped around her throat threatening to crush her will. "No!" she yelled, shaking her head violently. "These are just words. We're stronger than that." She felt Daniel squeeze her hand, grounding her in reality, refusing to let the despair overwhelm them. They raised the poker high, their minds linking on unyielding memories of love, laughter, and resilience. "Our lives were not built on fear," Daniel declared, voice steady. "We rise together." With ferocity, they struck the iron poker into the dark void, shouting a powerful, determined resolution, "We are not afraid." The entity reared back, its tendrils fraying and dissolving as they clung to their memories like lifelines. Sarah felt a sudden rush, like a wave crashing over her as the shadows shrieked in agony, unable to withstand the light unfurling from within them. The darkness buckled, weaving and recoiling, bursting like a balloon, as their light filled the cabin, reclaiming what had been consumed. "What is happening?" Daniel gasped as the room began to shift, pulsating with the potent energy of their defiance. Shadows fought and shrieked, unwilling to accept defeat, but their cries were drowned by the roaring brightness now surging forth from the altar of memories they had summoned. As beams of light shot up, painting the walls with warmth, the shadows began to collapse in on themselves. The proximity of hope burned brighter than fear, and Sarah felt that collective heartbeat, the connection that tethered them to one another, forging strength in the face of insurmountable dread. "Let us finish this," Sarah cried. Together, they drove the poker into the darkness once more, breaking through any remnants of despair still trying to claw their way back into the light. The shadows shrieked and faded, retreating from the pure essence of their bond, and then, all of a sudden silence. It hung in the air, heavy and still. The oppressive weight lifted, and for a moment, Sarah and Daniel gasped, collapsing together to the floor. They clung to each other, panting, eyes wide, struggling to absorb the dawn of reality surrounding them. The cabin around them shimmered, the oppressive darkness fully dissipating, leaving only dim light spilling through broken windows. "Did we do it?" Daniel whispered, eyes scanning for shadows that weren't there anymore. Yeah, we did," Sarah breathed, relief flooding her with the warmth of survival. As they stood, realities reaffirmed by the fleeting shadows of fear, they looked out into the woods beyond. The evil that had pursued them had vanished, and with it, the dark tales that haunted Maplewood. Hope surged within her, filling her with an exhilarating rush. "It's over," Sarah spoke softly, squeezing Daniel's hands tightly, the echoes of their battle still resonating in their hearts. "We fought back." Daniel nodded, finally taking a deep, shaky breath, a smile breaking through the remnants of dread. "We're stronger than we thought." And at that moment, the light of dawn broke through the trees, illuminating their path forward, promising a story unmarred by shadows, an undeniable truth that they had forged through courage and defiance. As they emerged into the light, they left the shadows behind, ready to embrace a new beginning, together, and so concluded their battle, not just for their lives, but for the very soul of Maplewood. The balance restored, the beginnings of new tales began to unfold, ones less burdened by darkness, eternally chased away by an indomitable spirit that would never give in. Now, before you go, you need to subscribe immediately to the channel, so you don't miss our next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to show your love and support, and feed the algorithm. And flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this wild ending. You guys, this is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share this episode with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion.